Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to another edition of Bigfoots Pad Paranormal Radio. Today's show is going to be about mystical visions and mystical happenings. Today's show is going to be led by Nick, also known as the Mothman Poirier, and this is going to be one show that you don't want to miss.
Exactly.
Ladies and gentlemen, it seems we have a problem. I would like to introduce
Bigfootspat Paranormal Investigations Team.
Welcome back to the show. How you doing today, Nick?
I'm doing fine. Are you guys doing okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we're going to get started with a little bit of news for today's show. My first news story is called Running Bigfoot. Definitely an interesting photo, to say the least. There's a photo on the internet, supposedly a running Bigfoot. At a quick glance, the stalwart creature looks bipedal and oddly shaped. At closer inspection, the oddness becomes a bit more revealing. Take the hind legs, for example. They're shaped more like a deer's hind quarters than the anatomy of what we would accept to be a Sasquatch. Next, take a good look at the front appendages. Either those are deer-like hooves or Sasquatch is suffering from a T-Rex syndrome. Now, onto the dubiousness that is the creature's head. I'm really not sure what to say about this one. It appears incorrect against Mother Nature herself that a creature that size would have a strange posture like that with its head cocked back. To make a long story short, there was a photo contest online, and somebody submitted a picture of what looked like a running Bigfoot. I was going to say, Nick, you've seen the picture.
Yeah, I have.
What do you think?
It doesn't look like a Bigfoot to me, in my experience looking at various different types of pictures of Sasquatch or alleged pictures. I mean, a few years ago there was another alleged picture of Sasquatch, and I ran the picture through some very strict filtering things on this photo editing program, and the creature wasn't a Sasquatch. It was just a zoomed-up picture of a giant black crow. The distortion in the photo made the picture look like it could have been a primate, just, looking at it at first glance. But after, like you said earlier, you look in the deep to the devils in the details, after you look at it closely, you just see that it's not what it appears to be at first glance.
What do you think, Tim? Have you seen the pictures?
No, I haven't seen it yet, unfortunately.
Well, that's really interesting. The next one, a Minnesota casino has cooked up the world record bacon cheeseburger, 10 feet in diameter and weighs more than a ton. The behemoth burger was served up Sunday at the Black Bear Casino restaurant near Carlton. It tipped the scales at 2,014 pounds. thought that was a little bit interesting, especially because Nick's the cheeseburger connoisseur.
I don't know. I think King Sassy's more of a connoisseur than me. He especially likes the big cheeseburgers from Jack in the Box, I hear, and he really likes how the people in the Jack in the Box like to pack on the sauce. Isn't that right?
Only if you like the double cheese. Here's an interesting one. It says Klong Luong, Thailand. When the company Apple founder Steve Jobs died after a long fight with cancer last year, software engineer Tony Soong sent an email to a Buddhist group in Thailand to find out what happened to his old boss now that he's no longer with us. This month, Mr. Soong received his answer. Mr. Jobs has been reincarnated as a celestial warrior philosopher. Dhammakaya, I think the group said on a special television broadcast, and he's living in a mystical glass palace hovering above his old office at Apple's California headquarters. What do you think, Tim?
Oh, so I'm looking up your Bigfoot picture. I didn't get the last part of the story. What was the very end?
He's living in a glass palace as a philosopher warrior.
Weird.
Let's say, Nick, you probably have something interesting to say about this.
It's pretty bizarre, but it's not as bizarre as the news story that I'll share after you're done your news stories. This will make everybody laugh, what I get to say.
Well, here's a good one. A Coastline furniture store in Waco, Texas, has a couch from the 1950s, they say, erased information from a computer and possibly even caused a death. When it comes to paranormal activity, there's two types of people, believers and skeptics. The guy named Dean McNeil is a believer. My close friend of 30 years, he says, passed away not too long after we took in the couch. It's a bad luck couch, he says. And he believes the sofa with 3 cushions and 6 legs is more than just that. As for Dean, he just hopes someone will take the couch off his hands. There's no way you're putting that in my house, he says. So if you're looking to buy a haunted couch, you might want to bring your checkbook because its standing price is $3,000.
Wow.
Would you buy a haunted couch?
No.
You think it could be haunted?
It probably could be, but I wouldn't buy it.
What do you think, Nick? Do you think that maybe, how would the couch have caused someone's death, Nick? Like, what do you think?
Perhaps there was a moving accident. That's all I could think. Maybe somebody was...
Either that or they think it was attached by a spirit somehow.
Oh. I'm not completely sure. I said I think the only way a couch could cause a death to me would be a moving accident.
Oh, so you think maybe there could be a spirit attached to the couch if someone had died on the couch?
Yeah. Or, I mean, someone could have died on the couch as well if someone was sick. And I mean, there's 1,000 what-if scenarios you could put out there, but, you know, someone could have had a heart attack, someone could have been on their deathbed on the couch. I mean, we could go on and on and on. But, yeah, I guess a soul could get attached to a couch for whatever reasons there might be.
I thought it was sort of an interesting story.
Yeah. Pretty interesting.
You had a news story, Nick?
Oh yeah. This one will send people to the floor laughing and rolling. Multi-platinum pop star Kesha has claimed recently in an interview that she had intercourse with a ghost. She said that the spirit came from on high and stimulated her into an ecstasy.
Oh, yeah.
Apparently, she's not the first. I think there was another actress by the Mexican actress, Lucy Liu, the Asian. Lucy Liu, was it her that claimed she had intercourse with Elvis's ghost?
Oh, no, there was somebody else. But, yeah, and by the way, just made it to CNN News, by the way. Nick and I were watching it 2 nights ago.
This is on CNN. Kesha says that she had intercourse with her ghost, and I just thought that was quite amusing. I mean, there are spirits out there like succubuses, incubuses, and various other types of things that are known to do those actions, but I think there's more comedic value to it than any seriousness. How about you guys?
Yeah, that was pretty funny when you and I were watching that.
Well, yeah, we get started with today's topic, Nick.
All right. Well, today, guys, we're going to be talking about visions and mystical experiences. This has been a topic that's interested me for a while, for a variety of reasons. First, I have had a couple of mystical experiences myself, which I will share later on in the show just briefly. And I've studied these things over the years, and there's so many different theories as to what they are and what happens, and there's just really no definitive answer, though, as to what happens. I'm just going to put that out there right now. I mean, some people say, on one extreme, I guess, that mystical experiences are just the byproducts of chemical reactions in the brain. This, I guess, you could probably throw near-death experiences into this as well, but today we're going to be focusing on experiences people have while they're conscious, while they're awake.
Mm-hmm.
So dreams could also probably fall into this as well, but again, we're just going to focus on stuff that people have when they're awake. And then on the other end, people say that mystical experiences are what they are. They're experiences with the supernatural. So you have those two opinions and probably everything in between relating as to what mystical experiences may be. But today we're just going to go through a general overview, and then we're going to just share a few different, anecdotal stories, a few different eyewitness accounts, as you could say, of mystical experiences. And then I'm going to get into probably the most scientific theories regarding mystical experiences that exist, in my opinion, by the gentleman in the name of Carl Jung. He himself was a mystic and a renowned psychologist in the early 20th century, and he was really into this stuff, and he was good pals with Sigmund Freud, so I think his opinion on this matter is something we should listen to. But do you guys have any opinions about mystical experiences, what they are? Have you had any of those type of things, Jared and Tim?
I have a friend who was actually on the radio show a few years ago. His name's Art. He actually had a few mystical experiences I think would be interesting for him to share on the show. I might want to see if I can get him on in the future to talk about them.
All right, that'd be good, because I've never personally had one, but I believe in them, though. I've never had one personally, though.
All right, that's cool. I just wanted to see what type of exposure you guys had to these. Well, first off, to begin, I'm just going to kind of go over what a mystical experience, what would be the definition of what we're working with today. Because like I said earlier, you could include NEDs, dreams. I mean, there's so many different types of mystical experiences out there. I just want to kind of put a framework in for people to understand what I'm talking about. First, again, people who have these experiences are typically awake and conscious and aware. Oh, here's another little side note. People allegedly have mystical experiences when they take drugs. Everyone from the Indians, the Native Americans of both North and South America are known to, and they were in the past and still use certain drugs to induce some type of a trance or other worldly state of consciousness to have these really, really crazy trip outs, which they interpret as being religious. And then you have Timothy Leary in the 60s, who's Dr. Psychedelic that promoted the use of acid and other types of hallucinogens for people to tap into their other consciousness. I'm not talking about those type of mystical experiences either. But, yeah, I'm talking about when people are awake, conscious, and aware. That's the first thing I want to say. Secondly, when these people are when they're awake, they have what they would describe as otherworldly experiences. It feels as if they're not where they are. Like if you're sitting in your living room and you have a mystical experience, you're not going to feel like you're in your living room anymore. You've gone off to a different place. And oftentimes, these type of experiences are associated with prophecies. We all know about biblical prophecies and what the Old Testament prophets and prophets of the New Testament, the Christian Bible. There's Muslim prophets. There's Hindu. There's prophets of all different religions all across the world. So that's probably the most common and the most understood, I guess you could say the most commonly heard of mystical experience. So it's commonly associated with prophecy. Third, this thing is very often associated also with divination, or when people try to communicate with when a medium or any individual, doesn't have to be medium necessarily, tries to communicate with the dead. I've personally tried to do this myself, and I believe King Sassy and I actually tried this years ago. I don't know if he remembers, but we tried inducing ourselves into a trance, and I think him and I saw some pretty weird things. Do you remember that, Jer?
Oh, yeah, I do actually remember that.
It was years and years ago when we first started getting more and more into the paranormal, but we tried that, and yeah, we saw some pretty weird things. So divination is something that is also associated with this. And as I said earlier, people who go through these have otherworldly experiences. They describe themselves as being emptied out, or they float out of their body, something along those lines. As you'll hear in upcoming stories that I'll share with you guys, people always describe themselves as being taken out of their body. They are in another world, taken out of their body. So out-of-body experiences are associated with 99.99% of these mystical experiences. So that's just a general overview. Guys have any opinions, thoughts, questions currently at the moment?
Well, I know that there's people that say if you do voodoo or things like that, they could also be taken out of your body, and they have like weird mystical experiences doing that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's what I've heard too. Okay,
I
think that's probably one of the most common mystical things like that are during religious ceremonies.
Yeah, voodoo and other types of shamanistic, I guess you could call it religions, do involve trying to induce mystical experiences on a person. Mystical experiences themselves go back a long, long time. I mean, probably before recorded history. I'm going to start out at Plato, actually. Plato is a figure that a lot of people in the Western Hemisphere are familiar with him. He himself was a prominent mystic of his day, and mysticism formed the whole basis for his philosophy. And his philosophy later went on to basically help lay the foundation for ancient Greek civilization, Roman civilization, Egyptian civilization. I mean, Plato is a big deal. And mysticism was the foundation of his thought. So I just wanted to put that out there. I'm actually going to share one of his own stories from the book, The Republic, later on, but we'll get to that in due time. Here's another interesting side note for everyone out there listening to remember. There was a study done about 10 years ago. I can't give an exact date. It's about 10 years ago. Some scientists took two groups of people, a group of Catholic nuns and a group of Buddhist monks. They put the group of Buddhist monks in one room to pray and do what they do, and then they put the Catholic nuns in another room to pray the rosary. And they attached electrodes to their heads to take brain scans of what happened when these people prayed. And the interesting thing is, when both groups of people prayed, there was one area on the brain that became very active, that had a lot of electrical activity. This area that was stimulated, it's been called the God spot on the brain by scientists, because when people pray and have mystical experiences, they tend to have this area of the brain very active. So mysticism, as you could say, is built into our very nature. It's built into our hardware, into our brains. So that's another thing to remember. And here's one last little thing to remember as I talk about different mystical experiences from different religions, different cultures, different time periods. There's a definition of something called a theophany. And this was a word made up by, I believe, a guy named Don Scotus of Arizona, I think. I took a philosophy class and I heard this term and it's kind of stuck with me. But a theophany is seeing the other world in ways we understand. Basically, Don Scotus, it might have been Dionysius the Areopagite, another famous mystic in the history of the Western civilization, who might have termed theophany. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and see my philosophy 101 notes. But in other words, when people have these experiences, they experience them in ways they understand. I mean, that only makes sense, guys, right? Mm-hmm. Because, for instance, in near-death experiences of Christians, not all the time. Again, there's experiences, for instance, of atheists seeing Jesus in a near-death experience or in a vision. So this isn't something that applies to all people all the time. It's just kind of a rule of thumb. But if a Christian has a mystical experience, they tend to see Jesus. If a Buddhist has a mystical experience, they tend to see Buddha, etc., etc. So whatever culture you belong to is going to help shape your understanding of how you see the other world, the supernatural. So that's something that we have to keep in mind as we go through these different stories, again, that come from different types of people. So first, I'm just going to start out with a story of an anonymous person in 1948. There was a woman who was reading the book The Phaedo by Plato. Again, remember, Plato was a mystic, and he wrote about a lot of mysticism in his works. He talks about meditation and releasing your soul into God and a bunch of other really, I don't say kooky ideas, but stuff that's really just, that goes over your head, unless you're really good with that type of thing. She's reading the book The Phaedo, and she says that she had never believed in out-of-body experiences or mystical experiences before. She's like, I was an atheist, and I didn't believe in, these types of things. But as she was reading the book, The Phaedo, she all of a sudden felt this weird rush of energy, and her body, or she left her body, she said, and she was floating at the ceiling, looking down at her body. She was sitting in the corner in a chair, and she was reading the book, and then she feels this rush of energy, and then she's floating above her body looking down at it. Have you guys heard of any stories similar to that?
Not any time recently.
Oh, all right, but it's a very interesting story. You know, again, I've heard many out of. Again, I've studied this phenomenon for many years, and I have often heard stories of people coming out of their bodies and looking at their bodies as if they're like looking at someone. Like if I were to walk over to Jeremy right now and talk to him and look at him, that's what these people describe their visions like. Like they can walk up and talk to their body like there's somebody else.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
This itself is a very common thing that you find in a lot of mystical experiences. Again, it's really weird how people can see themselves literally from, a different angle.
Mm-hmm.
Another account comes from Eileen Tapper. She was taking care of her sick grandson, and she saw an orb in the room. An orb which is, here's a reminder for everybody who's listening, is a common phenomena associated with ghostly and spiritual phenomena. So she sees this orb in the room near her sick grandson, and she was sad and saying, what's going on? Is my grandson going to be okay? She's talking to this orb. That's what she says in this account. And all of a sudden, she felt like she was getting sucked through her feet. She felt a burst of energy. That's something that a lot of these people describe, a weird burst of energy. And she feels like she was sucked through her feet into flight. The only sensation she felt was a rushing wind. She was returned to her body shortly afterwards, and she woke up lying on her back in bed. So she was sitting beside her grandson's bed. She felt a burst of energy, and she felt a wind. And she was sucked out. Her soul, spirit, consciousness, whatever you want to call it, was sucked out of her body, and she just kind of lost all sensation for a second. She just felt a rushing wind. And then she woke up, just a few minutes or she didn't specify how long the experience was. She just says it was a short time. So I'll say a couple minutes. After a couple minutes, she woke up on her back in bed. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah. He said, what do I think about it? That's weird. So she had like a near-death experience, or she just felt like she was getting sucked out of her body?
She was alive. She was perfectly awake and conscious, and she was fully aware of everything that was going on. She saw an orb, and she got her, like I said, her soul. Well, I'll call it her soul. Her soul was sucked out of her body and was caught up in a whirlwind. She couldn't see anything, she said. She could feel anything. All she could feel was this wind. That she was this whirlwind. She was caught into flight. This is not a sensation anybody alive would know, but imagine being caught up in a tornado. That's probably what she felt like. She was just caught up in a whirlwind in which she had no control over what was happening.
Yeah, that's weird.
It's like I said, it's even all these things are strange. I don't say it's stranger than the last one, because all of them are somewhat equally strange. Okay, here's another one that's pretty interesting. One woman describes her out-of-body experience as exiting the body to swim in an ocean of light. And I put ocean of light in quotation marks. And this is an interesting thing I want everybody to kind of grasp, the ocean of light, or a sensation. I'll describe some sensations she had in a second, but in one of my mystical experiences, I had something similar. And again, we'll talk about that when I get to it. I just want everybody to remember that ocean of light, because people often go into something else. They exit their body and they feel as if they've emptied themselves into something greater. Oftentimes people call it God, but it might be something else. Again, I'm not trying to push one worldview over another over here. I'm just talking about the evidence, what's there. And a lot of people call it God, but you could call it a higher power, some type of energy field. I don't know what it is. But people lose themselves into this other self, which people commonly call God. And she said her entire spirit was covered in this ocean. It was giving her feelings of love and comfort. She said she felt the most love and comfort that she had ever had in her life, period. And that's interesting because one time I was talking, I'm going to bring up another side note to compare this story to another I've heard. I was talking to a friend of mine who was a former Baptist minister. He began experimenting with the occult and dark magic and light magic, and he shared a lot of stories with me. And he said one night after he had done a ritual, he was praying to God, and he just said, I was lost. I didn't know what had happened to me. He's like, I was just broken. And he said he felt this like electric feeling in him. And after that electric feeling, he felt love and assurance, just like this woman describes. And he said from then on forward, he knew that somebody was looking after him. He said, he's an old Southerner. I don't know if it's an angel or God or whatever it is, but something's looking after me. But I just wanted to highlight that because those two stories, along with my own experience, have the feeling of love and the ocean of light, and again, I use that as a very loose term, as being common denominators. We all have those things in common. A lot of these experiences have many things in common, and I will try to point those things out as I go through the show. And she said she had sensations of a gentle breeze. There we go again with that wind, just like the last woman. And it was at her arms wrapping around her before she returned to her body. So in the previous story that we heard, the lady was caught up in a wind. And this lady was caught up in a wind that carried her to and from her body. So I think that's also very interesting. Now, guys, why? I mean, this is a totally opinionated question, but why do you guys think these people describe being called? Well, why would you feel like you're being caught up in a wind? Why a wind? Why not a wave or something else? Why a wind? Do you guys have any opinions?
Well, I'd say wind as compared to any other sensation because it's almost like a flowing feeling, I guess, is what people just, that's the only way I never had one, but that's what I was thinking. I would think it'd be like a flowing experience. But I know with the near-death experiences, I watch a lot of those shows and read a lot about that. Those people say there isn't really a wind in most cases, that they're just kind of appear in a tunnel of some sort. But in the cases that you're talking about, they said something about, like you said, a wind. Maybe the wind is whatever that feeling is, it's what's projecting out of their body is what I was thinking.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Tim, do you have any thoughts or just kind of listening right now?
Well, I'm listening, but I think that, I don't know, maybe the wind sensation, maybe it symbolizes something that we're unaware of, you know what I mean? Like maybe, like you were saying, that they feel like their soul's being sucked up a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, like maybe it's just like a universal sensation.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. It's something that we don't know, but it probably has something to do with, the type of energy that is involved in these type of experiences. So perhaps that.
Somebody on our chat room is asking, Nick, sorry to interrupt you, but they're asking,
okay.
Where do they go when they exit their body?
They go, again, like I said at the start of the show, they go to an otherworldly place. There is no definitive name for it. Some may just simply call it the other side. Other people might call it heaven. Some people call it paradise. I mean, there's a lot of names given to this place throughout the world, the different cultures by different people. Whatever you might call it that. I just call it the other place, the other side. I just simply call it the other side because I don't want to present a biased view towards one thing or the other, so I'm trying to stay as objective as possible. And I simply just call it the other side.
So, Stephanie was wondering, do you think, this is kind of a crazy question, but do you think an animal like a cat or a dog or something could experience one of these experiences?
Definitely. Actually, that ties into something I personally believe in here. I'm going to share some of my own personal bias. I think perhaps, I'm not definitive on this, but I believe there's good reason to believe in reincarnation, that when you die, you can be born again as not only a human, but maybe you're born again as an animal or something else. I look at my cat, my own cat, and I see him act like a human. Maybe I'm just reading too much into it, but I see him and many other animals act like humans. And I almost think, him and I probably have the same type of spirit. So maybe his spirit was a human being in a previous life. I don't know. So if you're open to that, or you don't even need to believe in reincarnation. If you believe animals have spirits, period, sure, I definitely think that they could experience these type of things. I wish I could talk to a cat to find our dog or whatever to find out.
Rascal is Dave Thomas reincarnated.
That would be pretty crazy. It would be pretty awesome. I found her Wendy's. But here's an interesting story. This story is not told from the first person, but from the third person. This is an eyewitness account a Swedish doctor had. A Swedish doctor by the name of Dr. Jarl, they don't give his first name, about 50 years ago or so, went on a trip to Tibet to study Tibetan monks. He had a friend at Oxford, another doctor, who had told him these stories about monks doing some crazy things while they were meditating. And this doctor didn't believe him. He's like, I got to see this to believe this. So he packs his bags and he goes on a trip to Tibet to go study what the heck this guy at Oxford's talking about. So he goes to this temple where these monks are, and he watches a religious ceremony that these Tibetan monks are doing. And during the ceremony, the monks play some gentle, soft music on, I'm not sure what type of instrument they would use, but whatever instrument they may use, they play a relaxing music, and they begin to place themselves into a trance, and they begin chanting all in unison. I guess I have to give my audio rendition for Tim this week, don't I, of what the monks would sound like? Yeah. I guess they'd probably go, just think of the stereotypical yoga meditator, So they're doing this, thing, and there's these rocks probably about 10 feet away from the mouth of a cave. And they're fairly large-sized boulders. And as they're in a trance and they're chanting, the rocks begin to wiggle. This is what the doctor said. He goes, the rocks begin to wiggle, and then they began to levitate slowly, until they're levitating in air, and then they were moved and placed in front of the cave, in the mouth of the cave, one by one, by some invisible force. I mean, here's a perfect analogy, and George Lucas actually drew on these types of things when he's making Star Wars. Just imagine a Jedi moving something with his mind. That's what this guy is describing. He claims to have seen this type of thing in real life. That's pretty crazy. That
it's almost like a mind over matter.
If it's true. Yeah. I mean, what do you guys think about it? Do you guys think this type of thing is possible?
I think it's possible. I mean, you hear about people moving spoons and doing, or not moving, bending spoons and doing PSI where they could make lights turn off and on and things like that. I know Brent would actually be a good one to talk to about that. He's studies that all the time.
Yeah.
Believe it or not.
Oh, I know Brent was into that type of thing. We'll have to talk to him next time.
Oh, yeah.
But, yeah, I think that's pretty wild if these men can pick up a boulder with some type of mental energy. So, I just thought that would be an interesting story to throw in there, because these people, again, are perfectly awake and they put themselves into a trance. And, I mean, they didn't describe what they felt, but they did something to be able to move something as large as a boulder. So that's pretty amazing. Here's the story I was talking about earlier from Plato, the famous philosopher and mystic. He had series of visions himself, and he also gathered stories from people about their experiences. If you read the Republic and the Fideo and these other various books he wrote, you'll get, tons of these stories. Here's a quick pullout. Here's a quick excerpt from the Republic. Plato saw, one day when Plato was meditating, he had a vision. And he saw people being reincarnated, born into new bodies. He said, people selected their new lives based on how they lived earlier. He said if someone was a thief in a previous life, they were a thief in the next life, most likely. Or if someone had a love of food, they would love food in their next life, just to throw a couple examples out there.
Mm-hmm.
And he said after they picked their bodies, they would have to go on a journey. They would start their journey off in this place called the Plains of Oblivion. He said it was a very, I guess, for the Western or for modern people to understand, think of hell, fire, brimstone, no water, that type of thing. The Plains of Oblivion was this large desert, this burning desert with hot wind, and there was no water and a scorching sun. These spirits had to travel through this desert before they got to the next life. They had to go through there for whatever reason. I don't know. Plato doesn't say so, but he said they had to go through the Plains of Oblivion before they got to a river where they would camp out, and they were able then to drink water from, to replenish their souls after traveling through the desert, or, the spiritual desert, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So, I think that's pretty wild, that vision he had. Why do you guys think those spirits that he saw, why do you think they had to go through the desert before they could get to their new lives? I mean, I have my own theories, but I want to see what you guys think first.
I kind of think it's like almost as if they have to prove themselves to get to like an oasis in a desert type of thing is what I was kind of thinking.
Right, that's what I was gonna say too. Almost like a journey type thing. Maybe like Jeremy said, they have to prove themselves or go through some sort of a test, maybe.
Yeah, I think that. I think that perhaps. I mean, I'm gonna borrow a thought really quickly from the Catholic Church. I think really kind of explains what the kind of. I'm not saying this is what it is, but in the Catholic religion, there is a thing called purgatory, where souls are supposed to have to suffer before they can enter into heaven because of things that they did in the previous life. So maybe this place is kind of a purgatory where souls have to experience pain and hardship before they can be reborn. Again, it's a test, and they have to prove themselves. It goes right back to exactly what you guys said.
Yeah.
And we got about 15 minutes left, so I probably get too many notes for only 15 minutes, but I would like to just share with everybody a couple of my own experiences now to maybe make it a little more personal for everybody, since you guys hear me blabber away on the radio every week. Tim and Jared know me. I live with them, so this isn't just the stories of some person I found off the internet or some book. These are my own experiences that I've had. Now, the first one I'd like to share came at a time when I was a very religious person. And again, going back to the beginning of the show, a person who has a mystical experience will experience the supernatural based on their own understanding of themselves. So at the time I was very religious, so keep that in mind. This vision doesn't prove or disprove anything, just kind of keep in mind I was a very devout Christian at the time I had this. But one night I was very depressed, and I thought that, nothing was going for me. This was happening when I was about 16, 17-ish. Nothing was going for me. I felt alone. It was horrible. So I started praying to God, and I said, are you there? Do you even care? The questions that everybody has. And I went to go to bed that night. But before I went to sleep, again, I was awake when this happened, I felt a weird warm feel, a tingling warm feeling come over my entire body. A tingling warm feeling come over my entire body that sent me messages of love and affirmation. I was covered in this it felt like a burning love. I can't put my finger on it, but it was a tingling warm feeling, which kind of gave me what that old man I talked about said. Somebody's out there looking at me or looking after me. I don't know what it is, but I felt this burning warm feeling, and I turned to look to the left side of my bed, and in the moonlight, I could see the vague outline of a bearded man in the moonlight, a very, very, very vague outline. And I saw this bearded man who was, in the moonlight at the same time as I felt this burning love. At the time, I thought perhaps that I saw an angel or maybe even Jesus himself. I don't know. Now that's what I say. I really don't know what I saw or experienced that night. But it was a very powerful experience that still sticks with me to this day. Do you guys have any opinions or thoughts about that experience?
It could have been, like you said, they say if you ask for him, he'll send some sort of a sign.
Yeah.
Well, I know in church, depending on what's going on at church, I know when I go to church, I feel that weird tingling, warm feeling a lot. But in your case, I kind of think it was some kind of a religious sign, because you figure you became really religious after that point in time, and religion really did help save you from doing bad things at that point in time in your life.
Yeah.
Because you were going through a lot at that point in time.
Yeah, I don't know. It was a completely off the wall experience. I was not on drugs, no alcohol. I was sober as can be.
It was not a NyQuil nightmare.
I did not have a NyQuil nightmare. So that was pretty crazy. Here's I'll go on to the second thing. We've about 10 minutes left. Hopefully we can get to Carl Jung. From time to time, I still get these. I haven't had this in a while, but sometimes I'll be doing something. I'll be in the grocery store line or cooking or cleaning, whatever, and I'll space out. But I just won't space out. I will feel like I leave my body, and I'll start to see things that aren't there. Like not like the voice, the boogeyman's not talking to me. I'm not hearing voices. I'm not dancing with Michael Jackson. I'm not doing anything like that. But and I have no history of schizophrenia or anything. So I don't know what this is either. But I kind of feel like I leave my body, and I see these pictures and things that often really don't make any sense. One time I had one of these experiences happen, and I saw an explosion, and something told me China, Russia, and Iran. This was about 4 or 5 years ago. So an explosion, China, Russia, and Iran. And I saw a city and a lot of people running, and it was kind of wild. I mean, I really don't know how to explain it, but that's what I saw. I had a vision of people running, and there was an explosion, and Russia, China, Iran came to my head. And now we fast forward to where we are now, and look who we're having problems with in the world. Russia, China, Iran. So I hope nothing bad happens. I remember telling people this vision I had, and I said, I hope I'm wrong. But this was years before we knew about, this was years before I knew anything about politics or how the world worked. And I was a stupid high school kid back then, so I really didn't have a good understanding of the world. And Russia, China, Iran, an explosion in a city. In particular, now, Obama might send his drones after me for saying this, but something told me Russia, China, Iran, a bomb that would come across the southern border. Someone would sneak a bomb across the border, plant it in one of our cities, and set it off. I don't know who would. Again, there's a Russia-China-Iran connection from this experience. So what do you guys think about that? Isn't it pretty weird how we're actually having problems with those guys now?
It is a little odd. Do you think it's sort of like a seeing the future type of thing?
Yeah.
Premonition?
Yeah, it was a premonition. I actually get those from time to time, but this is the most concrete one I can remember in the past, few years or so.
Well, that's weird. I know Brent actually had a dream about UFOs attacking or something like that. He was talking about like a couple years back. I thought that was a little different.
Yeah.
So you remember that time he drew like a picture and everything?
Yeah, I still have it in my room.
Wow. I'll have to bring that up again to him. It's too bad he couldn't make it on the show, but I guess he had some other commitments and stuff that he had to attend to, but his input would have been really, really interesting because I didn't know he had those sorts of experiences himself. I guess
that might be worth putting on the website.
Follow-up?
Oh, what's that?
You said it'd be worth doing maybe a follow-up and hearing what Brent has to say? Maybe your friend there, Art?
That would be. Well, Art said that he would leave his body. I guess he said it like a few times. He said that he could have sworn that he'd seen himself as a ball of energy, he was saying, or something like that.
Wow. But
I know that's the thing that stuck out to me, but I know this whole story was like 10 or 15 minutes long, so I don't remember exactly everything.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to hear it, though. It sounds like it'd be interesting. Wow, we only get about 5 minutes left in the show.
We have 5 minutes and 10 seconds left.
Well, I guess I'll throw maybe like my last story, and we can forget I'll call it, young. I mean, there wasn't very much interesting stuff with if people want to learn more about visions and stuff, just Google Carl J-U-N-G, like Jung. Carl Jung. It's Jung, though, in German. So Carl Jung and his thoughts on these types of things is pretty interesting. But I'll just throw out one little last experience. I've already talked about it on the show before in a Haunted Rhode Island special we did. When I was a kid, I was awake one night, and I had a vision of me lying dead in a casket. I was a kid. I was about 7 years old, and I saw myself with my arms folded on my chest, and I was pale and dressed in a little tuxedo, and it was pretty scary. And I remember crying a lot that night and just feeling terrified. And the next morning, my mother asked me if I was okay. She said, "Why were you crying last night?" And she goes, "You kept saying, I don't want to die, I don't want to die." And I have no clue why a kid would think about something so macabre. I mean, maybe I had too wild of imagination or had watched a scary movie. I don't know, but that was a pretty startling thing that I still remember very vividly to this day, like 16 years later, 17 years later.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another vision I had. I kind of, again, I felt like I left my body a little bit, and I saw this vision of myself as a young child in a coffin. So it wasn't something like I saw the future. It was like I saw what myself looked like at the present time in a certain situation.
Yeah.
And at the time, my house had a lot of interesting paranormal phenomena going on. I saw shadow people, and I saw my first ghost around that time. I mean, some weird crap going on at that time in my life. So, but those are basically all the stories I have now. I hear a knock at the door. I don't know who it might be, but we might have to end the radio show a couple minutes early, guys.
All right. Well, I'll end the show, Nick, while you answer the door.
Okay. Well, everybody, thank you for listening, and I hope you have a good week, and tune in to our show next weekend.
Yep, tune in Saturday at 3 p.m. Pacific for another episode of BFP Radio. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.